It's my pleasure to introduce Joseph Gum today. Joseph is an oceanographer and data steward working on research data management resiliency. He's the chair of the Earth Science Information Partners, ESIP, Sustainable Data Management Cluster, which works on keeping data freely accessible to all and has been developing the repository crisis scorecards, which we'll be talking about today. Please take it away, Joseph.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Again, I'm Joseph Gum. I was recently at NSF NCAR until last July, and now I am independent for the time being and working on the repository crisis scorecards, and we will get more into that right now. So the history of the repository crisis scorecards is that it was created by ESIP, Sustainable Data Management Cluster. I'm the chair. In reality, it started in early February as I was lying in bed thinking, what is going to happen? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm still awake at 2 a.m. in the morning. And so at that time, I started writing down some notes. And eventually, after a very quick cycle of development, we published this in April 3rd, 2025. We wanted to make sure that nobody was fooled by it being released on April Fool's Day. So we delayed it a couple days. And the inspiration for this comes from the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. The Federal Reserve instituted banking stress tests. So if a bank is stressed, similar to banks back then that took on bad mortgages, can operations continue as usual? What remedies are needed? So for the banks back then, it'd be like, how much capital do they have? Do they have procedures in place to weather bad loans? For us in repository land, do we have enough physical resources, say enough computers? Do we have enough staff in case something happens to staff? It's been an interesting trip here learning about what a lot of other fields have done. Uh, while I created this without knowing much of anything about um, librarian professional societies, archivists, and there's a lot of literature about it. Across meeting a lot of people about this, they have some very interesting frameworks that can be used to compare and contrast and try to bring something together, bring this one additional tool closer to the others and figure out how to make them all harmonized and not feel like everyone is repeating the same things. And so for the practicals of the repository crisis scorecards, there's a pre-worksheet, which are questions to inventory your holdings, prepare for your scorecards. Uh, Given my background as a geoscientist, I largely deal with large data sets, somewhere from terabytes to petabytes of data. And there's a big focus on, say, digital data and trying to figure out just how much space do you have? What sort of standards are being followed? How many people might be working at your organization? Once you sort of have a grasp on sort of the basics, I would say, of an organization, then there are two follow-up scorecards. The repository resilience scorecard, which is the original scorecard. There's about 50 questions and focuses on how different crises might affect normal operations. And then we have the data impact and recovery scorecard. Um, which is made from crisis invariant questions that we didn't want to throw out. So if you've filled it out already or if you've taken a look at it and you're like, why are these things sort of important? I don't know if they necessarily apply to me. I don't know how they relate. It's true that it's a little disjointed and that we weren't quite sure where to go with it at the time. But because of the quick turnaround, and we just didn't want to lose these questions, and some of them might be more important to some people than others, we added it as a second scorecard, so to speak, or an addendum to the primary RRS. And so we'll go into the crises scenarios right now. what happened is that we started by thinking of scenarios or specific cases that might be really bad. So for us, on our mind was Hurricane Helene, which hit NOAA's NCEI, National Centers for Environmental Information, and basically brought down their data center for 2 weeks. Wildfires in Australia, in LA, flooding, or even conflict damage. Um, and then with 2025, there's a lot of funding that was threatened to be pulled or actually pulled, or people walking into offices and saying you can no longer access your servers, or just people being Rift, Verid, vSIPT. These were all thoughts that were at the top of our head, and we sort of realized that instead of trying to write something tailored for each of these scenarios, we could group them into these four categories. And so we have this the loss of material, and it's not just crisis scenarios, but also mundane causes where you have your maintenance or refresh cycles for computers. Maybe you're rated for 5 years, but your computers are now going on 7, 8, 9 years. It's just a matter of time before a hard drive dies or power supply or something else, or there's a scheduled utility outage, loss of funding. Um, Again, with awards or contracts being threatened to be pulled or being pulled outright. In the case of some universities, some institutions, a loss of functionality, um, where either cyber or physical. Um, I think all of us have probably been DDoSed, whether intentionally or unintentionally, by both malicious and somewhat benign actors. And then finally, the loss of personnel, whether people are hopefully leaving on good terms by retirements, or even they're leaving to get a job that may pay them better, or if something untoward were to happen, such as a natural disaster where someone gets hurt, or they pass on because of flooding or wildfire or something like that. And so we're coming to where we are today. We have 17 responses for the scorecards. We're hoping to get 50. Currently on Zenodo, we have about 2,450 views and 2,300 downloads. Uh, so although it has made the rounds and gone to a lot of places, it is not, we don't have the response we would like, and I will get into that a little bit more later. Some of the feedback we've gotten so far is that it's useful as a self-assessment tool and a conversation starter. I've heard from some groups where they've had multiple people in their group talk, try to fill it out, and then try to figure out why their scores might differ or might be the same and what they can do to mitigate those problems. There are people that are worried about public scores that would be used to justify cutting grants or repositories. And again, it's definitely not meant for that. But there are people that are worried that any sort of quantitative score, anything that can be used as a fig leaf to take a hatchet to the budget even further, is they're worried about putting their scores out there. And I totally get that. And so we are anonymizing responses. There's minimal demographic data that's collected. Right now, we collect, I believe, country and sort of discipline domain. So if you're a generalist or an institutional repository, you might say something like, I am a multi-domain repository, and then we try to collect information on what of four cohorts you might fall into, whether you're the manager or you're operational staff or a researcher that works with a repository or a public archivist, people that might not work at the repository, but are trying to copy and save data or the holdings that are in there. And we do have stipends available for filling out the repository crisis scorecards. I'm sorry, I haven't had much coffee yet this morning. And so for future work, uh, we currently have a Sloan Award that started October 1st for 6 months to continue the RCS, which includes collecting submissions. Um, for the RCS, again, we have 17. We're trying to get to 50. Otherwise, we'll probably just tell them we don't have a large enough sample size to draw out the analysis that we'd like to do. We are finishing up an description paper so it can be cited. We'd like to publish an updated version of the RCS, which, after talking to Alan and others, we are very interested in working together in trying to create an addendum or another scorecard specifically focused on your use case, what you think might be helpful. Um, and we are holding off on that until the end of the award so that the survey instrument, the RCS, can be frozen in time while we collect this data right now. We are collecting data from 4 cohorts in the form of focus groups, and we have different stipend pot available for that. And again, that's repository administrators, scientific and technical domain experts, basically the operational staff, data users, researchers, and then citizen archivists. And then at the end of all of this, we will publish a white paper summarizing our findings from the survey, scorecards, and the focus groups, and all of the meetings that we've been presenting at, and try to provide recommendations for strengthening repository resilience. I still have, I think, 4 or 5 other meetings that I will be sort of talking about this, giving this presentation at in the future. The biggest one probably being the Research Data Alliance virtual meeting in March, that we have a session that's tentatively accepted right now. And so that's it. We have QR codes. You can get to sort of our landing page for the project at acipfed.org/RCS. We have the Sustainable Data Management Cluster has a monthly meeting for the first Monday of the month. Um, Although this is not going to be the case because I will be in Santa Barbara at a workshop, AI data workshop. And so, any questions? Happy to take any questions now, and thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. This is timely work because we have been thinking about resilience for some time now. I think most most keenly after this April workshop, as we had mentioned earlier of last year, where Catherine Skinner gave a keynote about how we need to really start investing in coordination as part of their Invest in Open research software infrastructure landscape report, landscape analysis. Um, I do have one, I guess to start with, I have one question about if you've is the intent to provide sort of actionable guidance at the end of all of this to repositories like these are so for instance if you to avoid DDoSs use content delivery networks like Cloudflare, but is that accessible for smaller repositories to have access to these sorts of these tools, or are there open source frameworks that they should be using, or things to think about as they're in their development and maintenance of these software artifacts, because every repository is a software artifact as well of varying complexity.
Yeah. Uh, in the white paper, yes, the goal is to provide some actionable guidance on what to do. Initially, at the beginning of this project, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to write this white paper because some of it is like if you scored poorly on how many copies you have, if all you have is one copy on one server, then the answer is make more copies or get another server somewhere else and then copy the data over there. And but to me, that was very straightforward about like how to resolve that question. But getting more into sort of the software question, yeah, we would like to talk about. I would love to go back into CDNs and there's what is it called? The NSF data cloud. That's I cannot remember the acronym for the life of me. But there are something like 12 nodes in the US already. And so can those nodes be used to cache other repositories that are not as big because a lot of them are attached to supercomputers or large infrastructure like TAC, um, like SDSC, I believe, San Diego Supercomputing Center, Texas Advanced Computing Center, University of Illinois has a supercomputer center. My former employer, NSF Car in Colorado, has a supercomputer. Other national labs, could something like that be deployed there? There are things like the Data One network that has a replication. Um, policy metadata to allow sharing of whatever digital objects between them. Does that only work at a certain scale? Those would be interesting questions, I think, to take up. And I don't know if we have enough time. It's already mid-January and white paper should be written by the end of March. Um, and maybe that's something we can talk about or work on together as something between Psycodes and the RCS project, which is weird to say that because the RCS project is largely a one-person project, which is me.
Mhm.
Um, when talking to libraries and institutional repositories and archives, there are groups like NDSA, National Digital something digital preservation archivists, iPreservation, and they have a lot of frameworks. There's like ISO 16363 for doing digital or repository certification. There's Core Trust Seal. Um, from my experience in going after Core Trust Seal, there's 150 something repositories that are Core Trust Seal certified. And then ISO 16363 is even more heavyweight. There is only one repository in the world that's
Oh,
certified for that. I
wow.
believe that's the USPTO. Patent and Trademark Office. Um, and they're asking me, why don't you just push ISO 16363 or Core Trust Seal? What makes this different from those sorts of things where if you go through all of the questions and you do everything and they have very actionable guidance on what you should do to be remedied to get that certification, it's like I think the scorecards are much lighter weight compared to those where it can take you months or years to actually get that certification and being able to have a quantitative measurement rather than a pass fail, a quantitative measurement that we can sort of measure across all disciplines, all countries or continents, however you want to do it, and then try to think of the scorecards as a longitudinal survey and be able to see sort of the health of scientific infrastructure and find that out over time. Maybe software, the groups of repositories and psychodes are doing much better than some discipline specific. Maybe something like life sciences has a very specific hole that needs to be filled compared to geosciences, compared to astrophysics, compared to material science or social sciences. I don't know. And that's another bit of guidance that we're trying to fit into the white paper So if you filled it out, what are some already existing frameworks that we can push you towards so that we don't have to write everything ourselves. We don't have time and we don't want to. I don't have time and I don't want to rewrite things other people have done.
It's always good
Absolutely.
to do a landscape analysis to see what
Yes.
else is out there. Yes. Good.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. Any other questions? I think it would be valuable for us to come up with, at least for our own domain, a set of things, and this is part of the purview of potentially this resilience working group, right? Like, what are the things that we should be here? Here's a principle that we should adhere to, and here are some of the tools that you can use to make adopting that principle easier to adopt. So we'll definitely take that in mind. Um, all right, I'm going to stop the recording then, and we'll just go to a free form discussion from here. Thank you again, Joseph.
Thank you.